So today's talk is the fourth talk in this short little series that I'm doing on Buddhist morality. And so for the first two talks, I went into Buddhist morality, what are the benefits of upholding the precepts. And then starting last class, I talked about the first precept, which was abstaining from killing. And we went into a lot of detail last class regarding what is constituted as killing from the Buddhist perspective when we talk about Buddhist morality. For the purposes of time and for your benefit, it may not be overly helpful to go into too much detail. I think the final four precepts that we talk about will do so covering the most important points, but I think the fine details we'll leave out. The Vinaya is very extensive. There's a lot of literature on it, and in fact there's an entire school within the Mahayana Buddhism that's devoted to the study of Vinaya. So what I've gone through so far is just scratching the surface of what the Vinaya represents. And so going forward, if you have any feedback about any particular topics within Buddhist morality that you're interested in hearing, please let me know. One thing we should know about the precepts is that it's quite a tricky topic to talk about. The reason being because a lot of the things that we are told to abstain from doing, abstaining from killing obviously humans, but even animals and other sentient beings, they run counter to our deep-seated habits and tendencies. We live in a society and culture that promotes meat eating, promotes sex and violence through the media, through movies, through the internet. And so it can be very difficult to accept that doing these things will lead us to suffering because we're so used to doing it. We've been conditioned by our past habits and experiences to think that it's normal to do these things. And so when someone tells you that you have to abstain from doing it, it can seem a bit difficult to accept at first. There's a saying that the ignorant person goes after pleasure and experiences happiness in the beginning, but it's followed by suffering in the end. Whereas a wise person may experience some suffering in the beginning when he embarks on his path to freedom, the path of practicing the Buddhist way and overcoming the defilements, because in the very beginning there will be resistance. Since time immemorial, we've been conditioned by our experiences, by our thoughts, and many of these thoughts are negative in nature, and they encourage and motivate us to commit evil actions that lead to our suffering. So in order to go against these defilements, it will entail some resistance and discomfort in the very beginning. But when we can continue to follow the way and set this goal for ourselves, as I mentioned before, we have to set a goal, set a vow that we follow, and that becomes the compass that we use on this path. Once we have that, then we can make progress step by step. And the precepts are obviously not something that you can perfectly uphold from day one. It takes practice and training to do so. The only person who can perfectly uphold the precepts is the Buddha. And all of us are still on the path to learning how to uphold these precepts. But the important thing is we should set the goal for ourselves and work step by step towards achieving that goal. Last week, I started talking about the first precept, abstaining from killing, and I ended on the first factor, which is object. Now, we have to know that in order to be considered a full violation of the precept, we have to have all five factors to be present. So the first is the object, and in order to be considered a major offense, it must be a human being. So any other sentient being, whether it be a deva, a spirit, or an animal, is not a major offense. It's a minor offense, and it can be repented. When the Buddha formulated this precept, he was mainly addressing humans or groups of humans. So we went over object last time, and so today I'd like to start with the intention, which is the second factor. Now, the intention is a very critical factor that determines the severity of the offense. So you have to have an intent or a motive to take the other person's life. And you have to knowingly and deliberately want to cause death to that someone. So by knowingly, I mean you have to be aware and conscious of what you're doing. You have to be conscious that this is a person and that you're putting an end to this person's life. So if you kill someone when you are sleepwalking or hallucinating, then that doesn't count as an offense because you're not conscious of what you're doing. Deliberately means that you have a motive or an intent to take that person's life. So say, for example, he took the life of someone you loved and you're seeking revenge against him. So that would constitute a motive to take that person's life. Or maybe he's your business partner and he's found some sort of information that can incriminate you, and so you take his life to cover up for your wrongdoings, then that's also a motive. Now, the third factor is the perception. So we must perceive that that object is a sentient being. And in the case of a major offense, we have to perceive that that person is an actual person in order to fulfill this factor. So an example would be, say, if you're operating a big backhoe and you perceive something to be a tree, and so you take it down, but then after you take it down, you then realize that it was actually a person. So you perceive it to be a tree, but it was actually a person. Now in that case, that would not be considered an offense, because at the time you did not perceive it to be a person. Now the reverse scenario would be you perceive it to be a person, but it ends up not being a person. Say it ends up being an inanimate object like a tree or a pole. Now in that case, that would also not constitute an offense, because even though you had the perception, the object was not a human. The object was a tree or a pole. And so that would not be considered an offense. Now the fourth factor is effort. So effort refers to all the actions that we take to cause somebody's death. So just having the thought of killing someone is not enough to make it a serious offense. But you have to carry out the act of killing, say through using weapons, drugs, poison, or setting a trap for someone. You have to carry out the activity of killing that person in order to fulfill this factor. And finally, we have the result. And in the result, the life faculty of the sentient being has to be cut off as a result of one's act. So if that person doesn't die as a result of that act, then that's not a major offense. That's only a medium offense, and that can be repented. But say he doesn't die when you perform the act, but he suffers an injury, and he doesn't recover from that injury, and he ends up dying, then that would also be considered a major offense. And the reason for that is because his death was a direct cause of what you did to him. So even when he didn't die at the time that you performed the act and he died at a subsequent time, that would still be considered a major offense. So that covers all 5 factors. And all 5 of these factors have to be present to constitute a major offense. If any one of these factors is missing, then that would be considered a medium or a low offense, which can be repented. Now let's talk about some of the exceptions. So with every precept, there are exceptions or cases in which if you perform the act in a certain way with a certain attitude, then that would not be considered a violation. And so the first is killing without the intent or knowing. So not having a motive to kill that person. So anything accidental would fall under this category of being an exception. If you're not conscious or aware that this is a person, then that's also under this category. And the second is killing while in a state of hysteria. So losing all control of your mental faculties, being in a state that's characterized by uncontrollable physical and emotional outbursts, not being able to control yourself and refrain yourself from doing things that you normally would not do. And in the Buddhist literature, there's a certain standard that they set for someone being in a state of hysteria. And so the standard is seeing excrement, you reach for it like it's fragrant sandalwood, or seeing fire, you reach for it like it's gold. Obviously, someone in the right state of mind would not do these things. And so this is the basic standard that the Buddhist literature sets for someone who would be categorized as being in a state of hysteria. These are the few exceptions. Really, the most important thing we have to realize is if we don't have the intent or knowing when we're killing, then that is not a violation. But we should be aware that even though it doesn't constitute a violation of the precept, we still have to be subject to the law of causality. There's still cause and effect that we have to deal with. Last time I brought up examples of taking the lives of animals. A lot of times we're not aware that we take their lives because they're so small and because we easily overlook and neglect these things. And so we have to understand that even though that we might not be violating this particular precept if we don't have the intention to take their lives, but we still have to be careful and aware of these things because there's still the law of cause and effect. There's still certain karma that we have to deal with in the act of killing, even if it's unintentional. So say, for example, you take the life of an animal by accident. The problem that lies in this is even though you don't have the intention, the animal obviously does not want its life to be prematurely ended. And so it's really the animal that won't let you go. It's not that you violated any precept, but the animal won't let you go. And so you have to pay back the karma in some way or another, in some fashion. And so, perhaps you might step on an insect, and in the future, that insect might be reborn as your boss. Let's say in your workplace. And so, if their boss is always being difficult on you, causing you problems, then really you shouldn't be blaming anyone because it's very likely that you caused difficulty on him in your previous life when you stepped on him. So things like that. I mean, obviously there's no serious consequence associated with accidentally taking the life of a sentient being, but we should still be mindful of these things because we don't want it to impede our path of cultivation. If we're always being met with conditions that are not conducive to our practice, then that can be an impediment. So under all circumstances, we should exercise caution when we try to uphold this precept well. Regarding eating meats, if you take the precept of abstaining from killing, you can still eat meat, but there are certain conditions that have to be fulfilled. So you can't see, hear, or suspect that the meat or the animal is being killed for you. And so you can eat frozen meat. You can go to the supermarket and buy frozen fish, frozen pork, chicken. There's no problem with that. But you can't take the life of any live animal. So you go into a supermarket and picking which fish you want from a tank of live fish would not be acceptable, and that would still be a violation. But because it's an animal, it would be considered a low offense, so it's still repentable. What I'd like to talk about next is what are the sort of consequences that we have to face by failing to uphold this precept. Now, one of the major consequences if we commit any one of the major offenses, so if we take the life of a human intentionally, is facing the consequence of possibly falling into the three evil realms. So that would be the animal realm, the ghost realm, or the hell realms. And if you read the Ksitigarbha Sutra, it goes into detail about a lot of the retributions that you face by breaking the precepts, by taking the lives of sentient beings, by stealing other people's things, stealing things from the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We should definitely not violate that major offense because it could potentially lead to a lot of suffering in these three evil realms. Short lifespan, that's another potential consequence. If we prematurely end someone else's life, then by the law of cause and effect, our life will also be cut short. And so people who have a short-lived lifespan in this life might be an indication that in their previous lives they did not uphold this precept well. Sickness and disease. And that's another potential retribution. There are cases when someone is always sick, that they're always dealing with a chronic condition. No matter what kind of medication they take, they can't get better. In those situations, that would be an indication that in the previous lifetime, they did not uphold this precept well. And so, what are some of the benefits of upholding this precept? The first is rebirth in the human or heavenly realms up to enlightenment. So as I mentioned before, if you want to be reborn in the human realm, you have to at least uphold one precept well. Heavenly realm, you have to practice what we call the 10 virtues. So that includes all of the 5 precepts. And so really, upholding the precepts is the basis for you in your cultivation of the path towards higher realms of existence, towards the heavenly realm, towards the form and the formless realms, and ultimately to the level of enlightenment. No sickness or disease. So if we can uphold this precept well, we will be healthy. We won't have any major sicknesses or chronic conditions that will prematurely put an end to our lives. And as a matter of fact, the Buddha had 2 disciples that were especially well known for their long life and good health. The first disciple, his name was Bakula. Bakula became ordained when he was 80 years old, and he was famous for achieving arahatship only 8 days after he became ordained. And he ended up living until he was 120 years old. And the second disciple was, I'm sure you've all heard of his name, Ananda. Ananda lived until he was 120 years old as well. And these 2 disciples were famous for their good health and for their long lives. And the reason was because they had spent countless lifetimes upholding this precept impeccably. They would not even take the life of a small sentient being like an insect or a small animal. And according to tradition, it was told that Bakula and Ananda never experienced one day of sickness in their lives. So So we can see that there are immeasurable merits from upholding this precept well, one of which is having no sickness or disease. The other is no nightmares and restful sleep. So if someone always has nightmares of them being chased by someone or them being pushed by someone over a cliff, then that's an indication that he has a stronger affinity to the lower realms. And the reason for that affinity may be due to certain karma that he committed in his past life relating to taking the lives of sentient beings. And so one who upholds this precept well will sleep well. And so that's another potential benefit of upholding this precept. Another one is longevity. And while we're on the topic of longevity, if we want to increase the lifespan of our own lives, not only do we have to abstain from violating this precept, but we also have to actively help in the freeing of the lives of sentient beings. So there's one particular story that I wanted to bring up. So there was once a Sramanera. So a Sramanera is a novice monk who's taken the 10 precepts. And this Sramanera was the disciple of an enlightened master. Now, this enlightened master, he had the ability to foresee the future. So the enlightened master, through his clairvoyance, saw that his disciple would die within 7 days. And so he called for him to come, and he told him to return to his home village, to spend the next 7 days there, and to return to the monastery on the 8th day, knowing that this disciple would not make it past the 7th day. The master knew that his parents would be devastated to hear about his son's death without being there when he died. And so that's why the enlightened master sent his disciple back home. 7 days later, the Sramanera miraculously appeared back at the monastery. And so the enlightened master saw that not only did his disciple come back with a completely different and changed complexion, but he was alive and he was very healthy. And so the enlightened master became a bit puzzled. So he sat in deep meditation and he entered into samadhi to find out what had exactly happened during those 7 days. And then he saw that during the first day, there was a torrential downpour of rain as the disciple was returning home. And after the rain had stopped, he saw that his disciple had traveled near a creek. And as he neared the creek, he saw that he came across hundreds of ants that were trapped on a mound in the creek as the water level was rising. Now, it was only a matter of time before the ants would be completely submerged by the water and drown. And so the Sramanera, out of his deep compassion for the ants, took a fallen branch and he made a bridge from the mound to the high ground where the ants would be safe from the water. And all the ants, one after another, marched across the bridge to safety. And so when the master saw what had happened during the first day, he called for his disciple to come in. And he told him, very joyfully, that 7 days ago, your life should have ended. And that was why I sent you home to be with your parents. But because of the compassion that you rendered to these hundreds of ants that you saved, you gained immeasurable merit from this great act of kindness. And so now not only has your whole complexion changed, but your lifespan has also been lengthened. And so many years later, this Sramanera ended up achieving arahatship, and he lived until he was 80 years old. So we can see that there are a number of benefits associated with following this precept. And if we can abstain from killing and help free sentient beings' lives, then we will be endowed with such qualities as no sickness, and longevity. The final benefit is cultivation of compassion. So by abstaining from killing, we allow ourselves to continue our practice in the Buddhist way. Because someone who does not follow this precept is essentially cutting off the roots of compassion within them. Compassion being rendering loving kindness and assistance to all sentient beings. So if you take someone's life, you're not rendering compassion, and you're putting an end to the roots of compassion within you. So it's important that we uphold this precept so that we can develop our compassion. Because as all of you know, compassion is the cornerstone of the Buddhist practice. And it's one of the defining features of being a Buddhist practitioner. And so by upholding this precept, we allow ourselves to continue to develop along that path to enlightenment. So that covers the first precept. And so I'd like to start talking about the second precept. Now the second precept is abstaining from stealing. Now this is one of the most complex precepts because stealing can come in very many different forms. And there are a lot of subtleties within stealing that many of us overlook on a regular basis. And so I'd like to talk about some of these scenarios and cases in more detail. But first off, let's talk about what the definition of stealing is. So taking what is not given through one's own effort, teaching others, convenient means, stealing by incantation, taking in trust, cheating or swindling, not repaying debts, tax evasion, and identity theft. So the first is stealing through one's own effort. So if you instigate and plan to steal something, you carry out that intent and plan to take what belongs to someone else, and you either physically do it yourself or you have someone else do it for you, then that is considered under one's own effort. Teaching others, if you teach someone else to steal, whether it's for you or for that person, then that's also considered an offense under this precept. Convenient means. So what do we mean by convenient means? So say someone drops a bag of cash in your front doorstep. So you don't have to plan anything. You don't have to physically go somewhere to steal something. But it comes to you very easily. If you take it under those circumstances, because it belongs to an owner and you haven't ascertained whether or not that owner has abandoned it, then that would still be considered an offense. Stealing by incantation. So this is not something that's common nowadays, but back in the Buddhist time, in India, there were certain mantras that people could recite. And one of the particular mantras was used to resurrect the dead. So someone who had the ability would be able to communicate with a spirit, and that spirit would find a fresh corpse, a body that had not been dead for too long, who still may have certain faculties that have not stopped functioning. And that spirit would enter into that fresh corpse, and the body would be resurrected, and the spirit would commit all sorts of evil actions, like killing and stealing. So if that person, the perpetrator who invoked the spirit, had him steal anything, then that would be considered an offense. Taking in trust. So if someone gives you something to hold in trust for them, but you don't end up returning it to them, then that's also a violation. Cheating or swindling, if we use any deceptive means to take money from someone. Nowadays, in the corporate world, if you're in finance, it's very easy to commit this particular action of stealing. So say you're a director in your company and you want to find a way of making your company look more profitable. So you end up managing your earnings, you doctor your books, so that you can get more money from shareholders. That would be considered a violation. Or any other schemes that you can use, Ponzi schemes, what we heard about in the news back during the financial crisis, about companies and funds taking other people's money unlawfully and using it to invest in risky assets. That would be considered cheating and swindling. Not repaying debts. So you borrowing money from someone and not repaying them, that would be a violation as well. And tax evasion, that's one that we have to maybe encounter in our lives. And tax evasion also includes custom duties. So this is one of the ones that I didn't know about before until I started looking into this in more detail. So say you're in the airport and you're coming back from another country and you bring back certain items with you that should be subject to a customs duty fee, and you don't report it as you're walking through the customs area. And so because that fee should be owed to the government and you don't pay it, then that would also be considered a violation. And finally, we have identity theft. So using someone else's identity to obtain some sort of benefit. So stealing someone's credit card and using it to buy something. It also includes, say, using someone else's membership card to get a discount on something, or using someone else's software subscription and downloading it for your own personal use. That would be considered all under the category of identity theft. The most important point that you have to understand with this precept is the object has to have an owner in order to be deemed as an offense. And in the case of a major offense, that owner has to be a human or a group of human beings. So anything that's been abandoned or discarded by that owner is not considered a violation. And so it wouldn't be considered stealing in this case. Probably won't have enough time to get into this today, but next time I'd like to go over the factors. So just like the first precept, there are 5 factors with this precept, and all 5 factors have to be fulfilled in order to violate this precept. And we'll go into this in detail next week, and hopefully we can finish off the series within the next 2 talks.